Welcome to Riverside Theater's video series on putting it together, and by it, I mean shows. For those who are not aware, Riverside Theater is the only professional producing theater on Florida's Treasure Coast. And by producing theater, we mean we create our own shows right here in-house. Today we're talking to Ann Shuttlesworth, our music director. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Oscar.
Many of you might have seen Ann from the front on a few instances where the band has been on stage, but mostly you've seen the back of her golden locks as she's in the orchestra pit leading the orchestra. How are you, Ann?
I am well. How are you?
We've spoken about how when Alan selects the shows, and then we get the rights, and then he hires the directors and the designers to put the show together. When, and how does the music department sort of get involved? Where do you come into the process?
Generally at the end of the previous season. So April or May, when we start having a little time to breathe after a really heavy, wonderful season full of musicals. At that point, I start doing research about how many musicians the score actually contains for the shows. We start discussing how many musicians we will actually have, depending on whether we're in the pit or on stage. And then it kind of goes from there.
So the show selected obviously determined the sound of the show.
Yeah.
And the sound of the show determines what musicians you have, correct? And I'm assuming you have a Rolodex full of great musicians that want to come and play with you.
We do. We have an amazing Rolodex of fantastic musicians, and we have the luxury of being able to choose someone who plays electric guitar for a rock show, or a banjo player for a more traditional or folk type show. And so we are able to choose from an amazing lineup of people. Sometimes you see familiar faces in each show, it just depends. And yeah, we're incredibly fortunate.
And in the process, where do the musicians sort of start with the actors?
Oh my goodness, the band actually doesn't start with the actors until the weekend before we open. So the actors usually spend a couple of weeks. At the end of the couple of weeks of their rehearsal, I have a couple of rehearsals with the band that are independent of actor rehearsal. So we have 2 shots at it to get the whole show figured out, spit shined, ready to go, and then we go into tech. The actors, the creative staff, we go into tech for about a week. And the band comes back in on that final weekend, and we have 2 days to get used to the sound, get used to the pacing, and get into the invited dress.
So that's when the whole band is together with the actors. But when they first arrive, how do you handle it musically?
The actors or the band?
The actors.
The actors. I spend generally the first day, possibly the first 2 entire days, just teaching those. Usually the principals come knowing their music absolutely gold. It's incredible, and we can tweak things as we need to for the production. For any group numbers or all of the ensemble music, that has to be done from scratch, because that's where the harmonies are. Maybe someone has done the show before, they know this part, so we kind of make sure everyone is in a part they're comfortable with and set all of the cutoffs and the phrasing and just the levels to make the harmonies perfect. And then we start with scene work, choreography, all of that.
And how much leeway do you or the director have with regards to the tempo and the pacing of the music that's written down on a score?
Depends on the composers. Some shows are very clearly required to be exactly as they are. Tempos are, that's at the discretion of the director and choreographer. Choreographer needs those moves to go perfectly in time with what the bodies need to do. So, we figure that out as we go. Ultimately, the director has the final say over all of it.
we've often spoken about how when an audience comes into the chamber and the energy that the actors receive from the audience, is that also translatable to the musicians? Does the sound from the pit change because there's an audience in the room?
Definitely, definitely. First of all, we definitely feel the energy from the house as well, and we feel the energy that the actors are returning to the house. It's very symbiotic. And then acoustically, we definitely feel the difference. When we go from tech, which basically has an empty house, to a house full of people, it definitely changes the entire experience, for the better, of course.
Of course,
Of
always for the
course.
better. So now that we know a little bit about how the show is put together musically and musicians and whatnot, tell us a little bit about Ann Shuttlesworth. How did you get started in music? Was your family a musical family? What prompted you to follow this career?
My father played several instruments when he was a school kid and into high school. There was a piano in the house. I banged on it. So somebody decided that I better get some lessons, which started when I was 4. And by the time I hit junior high, I was accompanying my junior high choir and was completely hooked on the process of accompanying a group of people. It had the singing that I loved to do. I was always involved with all state choirs in high school, singing and accompanying. I accompanied for church teen musicals, which I loved. I got to play my little electronic semi-synthesizers, sort of mid-'80s style synthesizers. And from there, I went on to the Cincinnati Conservatory to study piano, and did my best to stay out of trouble because my focus was pulled down the hall to the musical theater department. I spent a lot of time playing for musical theater kids, and I stayed for graduate work, and I did accompanying. So I have always loved the process of making music with other people. And when I was about 25, I got the opportunity to play in the pit as a sub for the Miss Saigon Second National Tour. Fell madly in love with all of it, and within a year, maybe less, I was working on the Annie pre-Broadway tour. My first time ever conducting with a stick. And then that was Annie on Broadway, and it led to many tours. So I guess I never got out, and I couldn't be more happy.
Broadway, touring the country, the world, with not only shows, but individual performers. And here you are in Vero Beach. How lucky are we to have you here?
Not as lucky as I am to be in a town with an amazing equity theater, so it's a good relationship.
Thank you. Thank you, Ann, for spending some time with us and giving our audience members a little more insight, not just the back of the head and those golden locks. Now they get to know a little bit more about Ann Shuttlesworth. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Putting It Together, and we'll see you next time.